All right, what's up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name is Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary, with my beautiful wife. Say hi, boo.
Hi, everyone. I'm AKDI, and I'm from Turkey.
And today we are doing something different. We're doing a double header. We are reviewing a film which is based on a true story and a documentary which is hella real. And the film we are reviewing is the 2019 South African film called Moffie, which is South African for the F word, the word that rhymes with maggot. And the documentary we are reviewing is a 2013 documentary you can easily find on YouTube called Fatherland. I wanted to watch both of these together because they're so intricately tied together in their narrative. So, Akti, how did you feel about, watching both of these films?
If you watch these two films together, I would definitely say that there is a connection there that you can make. For me, the characters I seen in Moffie, I was imagining them, some of them growing up and then later being the actual people in Fatherland. And yeah, there are definitely similar themes going on, even though there are also different themes as well. And I enjoyed both of them. It was really good.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I think it was a very smart decision to watch both of these together. And they're tied together in their story because Moffie takes place in 1981, right sort of at the tail end of apartheid. South Africa was sort of isolated from the rest of the world, and South Africa had taken over Namibia, so now they had a border with Angola, which was full of communist African rebels who were fighting for their freedom. So at the time, they were conscripting their young boys over the age of 16 to go and fight at the border of Angola. And Fatherland takes place in modern South Africa after the end of apartheid, 2013. And now these older Afrikaners, these older white South Africans, are enlisting their sons to go into this camp in the forest for a week to basically go through military training and indoctrination to believe all of the things that their fathers were taught to believe during their time in the apartheid military. So they're very closely related. We were trying to review this film earlier, but because of the nature of the topics we're talking about, we're talking about South Africa, apartheid, racist white people in that country. I'm pretty sure Elon Musk was listening and cut it short. What do you think?
Yeah, that's definitely something that he might do, just out of spite.
Yeah. I was saying to Acti before we started this the second time, that Elon Musk probably watches Moffie and jerks off to the parts of them being racist to Africans, right?
And yeah, and how weird is it that now I'm looking at this movie review page on Roger Ebert, and there's an advertisement of Elon Musk. There's literally his face made with AI right now in front of me.
Yeah. And the thing is, Elon, if you're listening, any white South Africaners listening, whatever, we don't have any hatred towards y'all. We love all people, in Africa, whether they're white or black. But yeah, we got to be critical of apartheid because racism is bad, right? I think we can agree on that, right?
Yeah, apartheid is bad. Racism is bad. Hating homosexuals is bad,
Okay. Yeah, let's get into it. So what we're going to do, we're going to read this review from Roger Ebert, which was written by a black writer for that website, where he's reviewing Moffie. Then we're going to walk through the story. But after we read the review, we're going to give our initial reactions to what the writer had to say. And Acti will do the honors.
Okay, so we're starting with Moffie's review, and it's by O.D. Henderson, and he gave it a 1 star for this movie. Moffie is one of those films where you'll get more out of it if you bring a specific nostalgia for or first-hand cultural experience of what takes place in its story. Director Oliver Hermanus employs the technique of purposefully leaving all emotion out of the film, opting instead to attempt an evocation of Stanley Kubrick in feeling and Terrence Malick in visuals. Cinematographer Jamie Ramsey provides some strikingly pretty pictures, but Hermanus makes the mistake of thinking Kubrick was a cold and unfeeling director. This common assumption is not true. Viewers feel for Wendy and Danny, for Hal, and for Vincent D'Onofris's private pile, the tragic figure of Full Metal Jacket. I bring up Kubrick's 1987 Vietnam drama because much of Moffie takes place in a brutal boot camp specifically designed to turn teenagers into heartless killing machines. The recruits are tormented by Sergeant Brandt, who is just as brutal as R. Lee Ermey's drill sergeant, though far less interesting. Most of his dialogue consists of screaming out the N-word and the homophobic slur the subtitles translate whenever the film's title is uttered. Unlike Full Metal Jacket, however, these grunts are virtually indistinguishable outside of our protagonist, Nicholas van der Zwart. When one frazzled recruit suddenly blows his head off with his rifle, I questioned whether I'd met this character before. Nicholas looks on with a dazed, emotionless expression on his face, which is how he spends about 90% of this film. He is such a symbolic, one-dimensional drone that even the rare, tender moment fails to evoke much of a response on his part. 16-year-old Nicholas enlists in 1981 to serve the 2 years military conscription required for all white men. We are told of this requirement in the opening titles, but the press release explains why it is necessary. The threat of communism and Die Zwarte Vegar, the so-called Black Danger, is at an all-time high. But that's not the only danger Nicholas faces. I wish I had read this release before watching the film, as it would have given me the foresight that this movie had no intention of speaking to a viewer like me. I may have been able to better calibrate my expectations. When the press release implies that the oppressed minority is a danger to its oppressor protagonist, it's clear that the film aims to speak to and identified with the oppressor. This is an intriguing path to follow, as Hermanus is a black director casting his film in an explicitly white gaze. The 2 times black characters appear, they are either being racially abused by the adolescent recruits or killed by Nicholas. Their suffering is the sole characteristics of their humanity. That first scene implies that Moffie will interrogate apartheid in some fashion, but it does not, leaving me to wonder why that scene exists if the film intends to show the military's role in fomenting hatred. These kids have already learned it at home. The latter scene occurs once the film pivots to war movie mode, showing the fruits of the military training's labor. I was more interested in asking the director about his choices than watching them play out, reminding me of Gene Siskel's question about whether a documentary about the film would be more interesting than the film itself. But I digress. As Moffie opens, Nicholas's family is celebrating the night before his leave. He is given a girly magazine as a going-away present, a symbolic gesture because he's about to be trained in the South African ideal of a straight white man who thinks blacks are inferior. It's also a useless gesture, as Nicholas is desperately hiding his homosexuality. The other gents at his party wax nostalgic about their fraternal experience, a nostalgia that would stick in the craw of a film unafraid of offending its core audience. Everybody has to endure this government-mandated hazing, and if you survive, you're truly a man's man. That other danger alluded to in the press release I cited is Ward 22, an asylum for those who even remotely convey a thought or characteristic that can be deemed homoerotic or are either caught or accused of being flagrant delicto with another recruit. We also hear of the brutal beatings that befall anyone who exhibits gayness, real or imagined. Hermanus is quite successful at showing the irony present in the inherent homoeroticism of training exercises, impromptu Fight Club-style brawls and group showers. The lingering camera gives off a military twinks for apartheid vibe, but it barely registers as a proper juxtaposition to Nicholas's muted attraction to another recruit, Stassen. I was frustrated by the way the film pussyfoots around their brief, tender, and ultimately unresolved are, though Hermanus tries to justify this by giving us a flashback to Nicholas's youth. This is the only peek into the character's psyche that we get, and it proves that Nicholas deserves to be more fleshed out than he is. The scene shows just how deeply ingrained homophobia is in the culture, as a very young Nicholas is dragged out of a locker's room by a grown man who has accused him of ogling another boy in the shower. Its harrowing power is almost destroyed, however, because the entire scene is scored to a mopey cover of Seals and Croft's Summer Breeze. Needle drops like this are the bane of my critical existence. Moffie is based on a novel, beloved autobiographical South African novel by Andre Carl van der Merwe. I have not read the book, but based on the adaptation, I assume there's a lot of internal monologue about its main character, things that cannot be translated properly into film. The movie was a hit in South Africa before the pandemic struck, leading me to believe that it had what its audience craved. But a film with its incendiary of a title needed to have more to say about being LGBT in a hostile environment. Dick Gregory named his autobiography after the N-word because he said that whenever someone uttered the slur, they are advertising my book. Perhaps that's a common thread with Van der Merwe. I can relate to the titles of both of these works, but my sexuality and my blackness are a package deal. Moffie asked me to set one aside to identify with someone who shares my affection but would hate me otherwise, then does everything in his power to be an unsatisfying punishment for my attempt. Quite frankly, I resented that. Your mileage may vary.
All right. Thank you, AKDI. Excellent work. I think with this review, I could understand where the writer is coming from being a black gay man. Him being a black gay man, not me. I think when black people watch this film, we know that apartheid is evil. And so when we see these young boys go through this hazing ritual that's so brutal, we feel like, okay, they don't have to show emotion enough. We don't have to see the torment that they need to express because we're looking at Nazis on screen. But I think the danger of this film is that people might watch it and not realize how evil apartheid was. Yeah, there are a few black characters in this film who get mistreated. We have a black man on the train platform who gets abused, and we have a black person killed. But we don't see the absolute, devastation that apartheid had on people. And it's easy to look at this film and just see beautiful, young, hot boys bounce around on screen in beautiful scenery and think, okay, maybe apartheid wasn't that bad. Maybe South Africa was better in the past. And that's my automatic reaction to this. I think, people have an idea of how bad Nazis were, but they don't have an idea of how bad apartheid South Africa was, if that makes sense. That's my reaction. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I can really understand that because it might have been more effective and better since the enemies of anti-blackness and anti-homosexuality are like the same people who are like white supremacists, right? And those are the same people who, support apartheid. So yeah, if those two powers came together in the movie, it would have been more represented of, a bigger demographic, I would say, and would have a stronger message, no matter like who is watching it.
Yeah.
And yeah, there could have been a better connection between like those two. I do understand it does focus more on like homosexuality rather than how bad apartheid and racism is. But like, I really like what he said about like the irony in like gayness that they show in the camera, where like the slightest chance of you being gay will get you like tortured. But then you have, like you said, good looking guys showering all together and laughing and, talking while they're all naked. Like that is a good irony that was shown. And I do also agree with him on the fact that Nicholas's character was lacking some emotion like throughout the movie.
I think a lot of the shots and scenes in this film look like they were meant for modeling campaigns. Because, like, these boys have, like, chiseled jaws and perfect bodies. So it's like, imagine Ralph Lauren doing like a spread for racism, right? Like apartheid by Chanel. That's what a lot of this looks like in this film. And I think there's a danger in making some of this too beautiful, right? Like, if you're making a film about the Nazis, yeah, they had fly uniforms, but you don't want to see, Nazis looking too good, right? Because people could look at that and want to emulate that. And I think about the film, what's it called? Salo, right? 90 Days of Sodomy or something like that. You remember that film?
Yeah, of course. I cannot forget it.
Right. And in that film, basically, young people are like tortured forever by these rich aristocrats, and they're brutalized to such an extreme degree, right? I think about how that film showed trauma on people and hopelessness, and how this film does it, right? I think a lot of it is internal within Nick's mind, like the guy said. If you base a book on an autobiography, where a person is writing in their journal, of course, there are going to be some things, some expressions, some feelings that are going to be hard to express on film, especially if you're trying to make a hyper realistic war movie. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, there could have been maybe like we could hear, Nick's inner voice. Maybe that would have been more effective into knowing like the character and more about like what he's thinking, because it was sort of frustrating not being able to know if he wanted to escape his reality or he was okay with his reality.
Mm-hmm.
And or he already gave up, or was there some hope still in him? Like we never know that really throughout the movie, and I think that would have been helpful for the audience to sympathize with him more in that sense.
Definitely. I think, the director, the writer, whoever left so many parts of this film empty, where there is no dialogue, where all you see are facial expressions, or you're looking at the scene of what is happening around the character, and just allowed the audience to sort of fill in the blanks. And I think that's hella dangerous for a film like this, right? He did mention at the end that, this film was a big hit. And I think that's because, the writer of this article is upset that people probably watched this film a lot and took away with it the wrong thing, right? Like, people listening to Kendrick Lamar is not like us. And instead of, focusing on the fact that this song is about, black empowerment, it's a unifying cultural thing, for black Americans, they're just saying, yeah, Drake's a pedophile. Yeah. Like, that's all they're walking away with, rather than, realizing that this system that these boys went through sort of destroyed them on the inside and not allowed them to be free. Right. Or even if they did walk away with that, they didn't realize how, they still want to try to perpetuate so many of the things that led Nicholas to be in a cage, because they probably look at the past and say, that's so great, let's bring it back. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. And it's like that supports also like at the ending as well, when we sort of don't know still what Nicholas is thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So, maybe as audience, we learned something, maybe that apartheid is bad, though that is like a minor message. Or, anti-homosexuality is bad, or, those sorts of things are bad. We get something as the audience, but what did the main character get? Like,
Right.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's walk through the story a bit. So, like the guy who wrote the article said, the film opens up with the screen saying that all boys over 16 are now, conscripted into the army. And the reason is that they're trying to stop the spread of communism. As I mentioned at the beginning of this review, Angola had their revolution to get rid of the Portuguese, and South Africa took over Namibia. And now South Africa has a border with Angola, and they're trying to stop the rebels from entering South Africa to fight against the apartheid regime and liberate the Africans. And in the beginning of the film, Nicholas is like outside, and I believe his mother has to like call him in to the house. And, she's like, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm trying to run away from here. I'm trying to get away from all this. And so she says, come inside. We're about to have dinner. Nicholas's family is there to celebrate, his going away, because all the guys now have to go to the army. and Nicholas's father comes. So Nicholas's mother remarried when she broke up with his real father, and she married an Afrikaner's man. And Nicholas's father, I believe, is British, which is why throughout this film, we really don't hear Nicholas speak Afrikaans, as far as I remember. I could be wrong about that. And for anybody who doesn't know about South Africa, in South Africa, the Dutch came there first. They were the first Europeans to land there, and they sort of settled there, right? Then the British came later, and they fought a war called the Boer War. And the British eventually won the war, which is why in South Africa they speak English today, and only a minority speaks Afrikaans, which is a variant of Dutch. And their communities have had some tension. And I think throughout the film there is a lot of tension between Nick sort of being like on both sides of that thing, because people make fun of him at the boot camp for being half British, half Dutch, or whatever, and stuff like that. Basically his father comes and gives him that magazine, right? And just looking at the film, you know that it's probably strange for Nick to be getting a Playboy magazine with Miss Wonder Boobs on the cover, because Nick wants the Playgirl magazine, hands down. So, yeah, basically the next scene, he gets on the train, and the train is all chaos. And all the guys there are like throwing up, drinking, yelling at each other. The drill sergeant is yelling in the background, order, order, stuff like that. Nick makes it to his cabin, and he meets up with another guy. His name is Sax. Sax asks Nick his last name, and Nick has that Afrikaner's last name. But Sax finds out that he's actually more British than he is Afrikaans. So they sort of bond, because they say, I think Sax says like, hey, this place was starting to smell bad because of all of these Afrikaners and stuff like that. And as they're riding on the train stops at a station, and they see a black man sitting down while the train stops. So all the white boys on the train are like yelling at the black man, hey, N-word, stand up, when a white man's talking to you. Eventually the black man does stand up because he's so afraid, and one of the white guys throws a sack of vomit in his face. And everybody laughs as the train continues chugging along. What did you think about like the opening scenes, and introduction to the characters and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can definitely feel Nick is disconnected from his family. I didn't know, what Moffie meant before, during this time. So, yeah, I didn't know if he was gay or not and whatever. So I just felt like he was like a teenager, he was just shy, didn't talk a lot and that sort of thing. So, yeah, I just felt like there's a disconnect there. And and when it was on the train, you can see like how different kids are battling with it, because there was one kid that was puking, there were like fighting ones, and I really agree with what the reviewer guy wrote about like the train, because he said something like, kids don't, at this point, these kids don't need to go to military to have hatred for black people, because they already had it at home. And I thought that was true as I watched this, and you said it again.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think the film had a strong start with Nick having that conversation with his mom, saying, "I'm trying to get out of here," and then later on we see him like run into the darkness after the dinner with his family. I think like the film was setting it up to show that like Nick really didn't want to be involved with what he had to go through, but he was sort of dragged into it regardless, right? And I believe that's the tragedy of this film, that Nick, didn't really feel the need to. And I think there's an argument to say Nick was not really a racist. He was just trying to survive and go through the rituals that were forced upon him as a man. What do you think?
Yeah, a little bit. Like you said, I think his father and his mother were like British, right? And then his stepfather is Afrikaners. So yeah, like he was sort of like, I'm not even like South African. So why am I have to
They
go
are
through
South
this?
African. Even though they're British and the Afrikaners have a different history, they both regard themselves as African. And on top of that, they both fought together to maintain white supremacy. There wasn't during apartheid, there wasn't a sign that said Afrikaners here, British there.
Okay, but that's how I viewed him, like, or maybe in his head, thinking like, I don't know, maybe he's different. But yeah, definitely, I didn't think he was like racist right off the bat. I gave him like, or I still give him that sort of in the middle perspective.
Yeah. As far as the scene with the black man on the platform, I was expecting there, for Nick to have some sort of like moments where he realizes that what they're doing is wrong, right? But he sort of just stares at it. And I think once again that's what a lot of black people are looking at in this film. Like the same oppression that you're trying to put on other people, you're doing it to yourself, and you're allowing the system to do it, right? That's what I was feeling right there. And it was such a brutal scene too. But then the rest of the movie is like just beautiful African landscapes. Little, like the writer of the review says, little twinks in military uniforms, digging trenches and taking showers. So it's crazy how you can have a whole movie in Africa and there are no like main black characters. Really, pretty crazy.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, that scene was very brutal. It was sort of hard to watch.
Hmm.
And yeah, and the rest of the movie, like, until the very end, we don't really see another black character.
Yeah. But then moving forward, the train is, chugging through South Africa and they make it to the stop late at night and it's pandemonium as the sergeant starts to yell, get off the train, get off the effing train. All the boys get off. They're loaded into the back of trucks and then, sent forward into the camp where they're going to be trained. And when Nick makes it into the barracks, one of the guys there steals one of his photos and doesn't want to give it back to him. But then another guy there, Sax, the guy he met on the train, makes fun of the guy who was trying to bully Nick, and they almost get into a fight. And then Nick gives up the porn magazine that his dad gave him in exchange for his photo back. Once again, I I don't know if I said this before, but it's always strange when your dad gives you pornography. If you're a guy who had that experience where your dad like gave you a Playboy or put you up on a DVD or something, it's always weird. I don't know if you've ever, if you know anything about that experience or anything like it, Acting.
No, no,
No, not at all.
no,
Okay.
not at all.
Not at all, not at all. But yeah, basically the like a good chunk of this film is Nick basically going through basic training, and they show the guys marching with their guns. The drill sergeant is yelling at them. The reason why they are there in South Africa is to maintain the system of white supremacy, fight back against the black communists who want to destroy our nation. They start talking about their raping our women and things like that, while they're, going through indoctrination by watching all these movies and marching as well. Yeah, basically, it gets brutal for a lot of the scenes. There's a scene where one of the recruits basically can't do push-ups and the sergeant says, this guy pimpled C-word. I'm not going to say it because YouTube is going to demonetize me. Pimple C-word is the weakest one here. He won't make it in our army, and I hope none of you end up like him. Then after that, he whoops on another recruit with branches and leaves, and then makes him, swallow his own throw up after he just, got the ish kicked out of him and stuff like that. They're marching late at night for kilometers, and then when they make it to the camp, the sergeant opens the coffee and the soup on the ground and lets it pour out in front of the kids, not even feeding them. I mean, there's a lot of times that the sergeant was just going off. But yeah, what did you think about, the majority of the film where they're basically going through basic training and getting brutalized?
I really like how it started because it was sort of like they were on the train and then somebody else, get out, get on the trucks, get in the trucks. And it was just like 0 to 100.
Mm-hmm.
And it was sort of like entering a nightmare a little bit. And then in their first day, like they are holding their guns and their hands are shaking because they've been probably holding it for like a couple of hours.
Mm-hmm.
And they are sort of like forced to be tougher and tougher by each training. And I thought that was reflected well in the movie. Because like first time we see them, doing push-ups or crunches and whatever, and they're all like just really struggling. And also, like, we hear all of these indoctrinations about like black people put in them throughout like their training. And there are like some, people who don't actually believe that, like Nick's first friend, Sucks. They call him like a commie, and he does, like, one time when they're watching a movie together about like how black people are bad and about like the history of the country and stuff. He says something, and then like the sergeant puts him up in the front and says like, "What were you gonna say? What were you gonna say?" But he's so afraid he doesn't say anything. So it's like you can see how that sort of like brainwashing and indoctrination happens. And I like how the director showed that.
Yeah, and after Sachs said that, they all got punished together, right? And
Yeah.
I think Sachs was an interesting character because, yeah, he was a bit defiant, but he never lived up fully to being, the one person to speak out. Like, throughout the film, you're hoping, like, it's either going to be Nick or somebody is going to try to buck the system. But, it's so crazy. Do you feel like that actually there is a satisfaction? Because there are moments where they, break the system, but it's just by, being gay, by like loving another dude. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's just by existing. And, yeah, I mean,
But
the
they
thing
don't
is, like,
actually exist. Like, it's not like Nick comes out and lives fully his truth or the other guy lives fully his truth, Go ahead.
yeah, I mean, it just exists in their heads, I guess. But it's just like they're threatening their rebellious things with their friendships. And these friendships are sort of like the only thing that these guys have, because they train a lot and everyone around them treats them like shit. So they really have like only themselves, and they're going to be going to battle together. So it's like one of the most important things of military, right? Just being a team. So yeah, like they're kind of forcing to choose their team because, they cannot endanger everyone.
Right.
And that's why I feel like why most people don't speak out.
Right. Because, you're in this unit together and possibly you all will be sent to the front. So all of you could die, right? So you need your man's back and, you need to be on the same page at least. But, yeah, throughout the, film, basically they're going through basic training. But then one day there's two soldiers that are caught in the bathroom, basically, making out with each other. And, the sergeants bring them in front of the entire platoon. And they say, these two soldiers have disgraced our units. They've disgraced our country. They've disgraced God. Our Bible says clearly that, loving another man is wrong. And these two kids are standing in front of the platoon. Their faces are beat up. And then the sergeant says, what are these kids? And the rest of the soldiers reply, Moffies. What are they? Moffies. What are they? Moffies. And that's where, if you didn't know what that word meant before watching this film, you'll know now, because the subtitles say the F word, the word that rhymes with maggot, right? Over and over. So, yeah, we even see Nick repeating it too, with a lot of vigor and energy in his face. He's screaming it too. And yeah, after that scene happens, basically, Nick is in indoctrination class and there's a guy sitting in front of him with, I guess, a handsome neck because he couldn't see his face. And there's a guy carving into the chair in front of him some type of poem. And we see later that the poem or phrase that he wrote is that even birds are chained to the sky. And this guy looks back at Nick and they lock eyes and whatever. A few scenes later, the soldiers are out there, digging trenches, and the drill sergeant comes and says, I don't want to see any of you coming out of your trenches, even if it rains at night. And he drives away, and then Nick stands on top of the trenches after the sergeant leaves, and he's like being defiant in that way. Later on that night, it does rain, and the guy that Nick locked eyes with invites Nick into his trench because Nick is like cold or whatever, and they cuddle up, right? And they sleep together that night, but they don't have sex as far as we know. So yeah, what did you think about, those scenes with the guy named Baxter, the gay guy who got beat up, and yeah, everything.
Yeah, there's definitely like, a lot of pressure for them to not come out of the closet, because you had a theory that maybe the sergeant might also be like a closeted gay person as well. We don't know. He does have like a very nice eyeliner and he is sassy as fuck, but yeah. Um, it is very scary. And then like after that scene, you also see them like talking to one another, and actually like none of them say anything homophobic, but they're just like saying what happened, and that the sergeant like took the pillowcases, emptied them, put parts of guns in there, and then let everyone beat. So it's once again using like your friends, your teammates against you. He's not even doing the fighting part, but he's like making his teammates do it, which is just another type of not only physical but psychological manipulation. And I thought like that was just very, very bad. And yeah, but it was shown nicely. And yeah, when it comes to like their scene, we see, Nicholas like being intimate with some guy for the first time, a little bit intimate.
Stasser.
With Stassen, yes. Nicholas and Stassen, they're being intimate for the first time with one another. But even if they're like, pretty hidden, they don't dare to like kiss one another, which once again shows like the psychological chains, psychological slavery of them, basically. So yeah.
Okay, and any comment about Nicholas, yelling Moffie at the kid, knowing that he was gay?
I mean, it's like peer pressure. It's what they're trying to do, trying to like wash their brains and stuff. And yeah, he doesn't believe it, but he has to play that role of like, I'm totally very, very straight, so he cannot put himself in danger, especially seeing like the guys beaten up in front of him,
Right, right. I think there are so many like missed opportunities in this film because the underlying danger that's created in this film is that will Nick get caught, right? You're watching this film thinking, oh, is Nick going to be the next person that they discover to be gay, right? And so when Nick stands up on the trench while the guy drives away, I wish they showed like the car driving away and Nick like defiantly standing up, because who knows, the sergeant could have seen him in his rear view. And the scene when Nick is like cuddled up next to Stassen, right? I wish they like showed the camera panning out from the trench and we see that, the other soldiers aren't that far away. And if they saw, Stassen and Nick cuddled up, like what would happen next? Like, I wish there was still that tension that was there in those scenes and those moments, right?
Yeah, that would have been good. And also, once again, some emotion from Nick would have been good as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, like he was, you can see like maybe he was thinking about either doing something or not. Like he was in that between space. Mm-hmm. But like, I don't know, maybe he could have opened his mouth more. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do something, like give us something.
Right. So then moving on in the film, basically the guys are in the barracks one night getting hella drunk and they're punching each other, fighting, play fighting, whatever, wrestling, and they're playing Spin the Bottle, which I guess does also underline like the homoeroticism in this film, like you said. Yeah, it's totally straight for us guys to play Spin the Bottle because we're not going to kiss. We're going to punch each other with our fists, right? So they're playing Spin the Bottle. And the bottle lands on Nick, and it also lands on Stassen, right? So Nick and Stassen have to get up and fight because the other guys pressure them into it, and basically Stassen, punches Nick. No, Nick punches Stassen really hard, and then Stassen like really lays into Nick and like just starts wailing on his face and stuff like that. And yeah, the drill sergeant comes in and breaks up the commotion. He looks at Stassen's face and says, Stassen, come to my office. And yeah, basically a few days later, they don't see Stassen anymore. He sort of like disappears. And Nick tries to like confront the sergeant about where Stassen went. And the Stassen is like, he had a medical condition. And do you have any more questions, Nick? With like a very stern look on his face. And Nick is like, no. And then later on during training, Nick falls down while he's carrying another soldier, and the sergeant gets really mad and kicks Nick in the face. What did you think about, those scenes right there?
Oh my God. Okay, where to begin? Yeah. So, yeah, that fighting scene was definitely like one of the ironies. These guys were always physically super close, and anything really can be considered gay when you're like doing all this physical stuff together. Yeah, and in that fighting scene, I thought Stassen was waiting for Nicholas to say something, or just even like, I don't want to fight, something like that, just a step. But then when Nicholas didn't do that, and Nicholas was like, yeah, I'm gonna hide that I'm a gay, and I'm gonna just like kick you in the face, sorry, like punch you in the face. Then he got like mad at him, he got mad at the system that put them in there, and he just like went off on Nick, and that's what I felt. Yeah, and I think like before Stassen disappears, there's that scene where Nicholas is sort of, I don't know if he's being upgraded or he's taking a break or something, but he's sort of like saying goodbye to Stassen, and then they kiss, right? And yeah, I don't know, like if somebody saw that and then put Stassen or reported Stassen. So yeah, that was also left a little bit confusing as well.
You're right. I did skip that scene. Before Stassen disappears, Nick and Stassen do kiss. And it's when everybody goes on, I guess, holiday leave or vacation after basic training. Because we do see Nick like wearing his full uniform now, and it looks like he got the beret, so he's a full soldier. And yeah, their kiss scene was kind of cute, I guess. But I just wish that scene had more tension, right? Like, once again, you're thinking, okay, is Nick going to get discovered the entire time? And when they do have that kiss, I wish they showed, like, the open doorway and, like, how close they were to being caught. Because just to keep that tension up. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. And I was thinking like, okay, if somebody saw them kiss and then reported them to the sergeant, then why isn't Nick in trouble? And then I don't know what happened after Nick went away that Stassen got into trouble. Like, did he try to kiss another boy? Like, what happened there? So it was sort of like a mystery.
My theory is that the sergeant is gay, and he called Stassen into his office after that fight, had maybe a like flirty conversation with him, got hella close to his face, whispered sweet nothings in his ear, and then later on when all the soldiers went home except Stassen, because he probably didn't want to go home to his family, the sergeant tried to make a move on him, and then, Stassen ended up getting sent to the asylum for the gays. That's my theory. What do you think?
Yeah, that might be true. Or, like I said, the one before, maybe I felt like the sergeant had a liking for Nick. I didn't know if it was because he saw him in like, going to better places in the military, or because he had some like homosexual feelings himself. So I don't know if he's like he knew that they kissed, but he only sent Stassen away, and then he kept Nicholas by his side. Cause after like the trainings and stuff, I felt like Sergeant was sort of proud or supporting Nicholas. Not like in a loving way, obviously, because they're in the military, but just like in that tough love type of way.
I don't see that. I don't see any sort of affection for Nicholas from the sergeant. Where do you get that?
That's my theory. I get it from like if he saw them kissing, then only Stassen went away and Nicholas stayed safe. That's my theory. I don't know.
Okay. All right. I'm still confused by that. I'm not getting it.
And also, like when Nicholas came back and questioned Stassen, he was sort of like mentorish, if that makes sense. Like he was like, just drop the topic, and nothing bad will happen to you. Just drop the topic.
I
I
don't know
felt
where you're
like he was
getting
like
that
that.
either. How are you getting that? He like almost fought with Nicholas right there. He was like threatening him. There wasn't anything
Yeah, I mean,
mentorish about
he's
that.
threatening him because he's in the military, but he could have easily like assumed that he was gay at that point and then put him in the Ward 22 as well.
No, no. He was probably just like, hey, where's my friend? He was cool until I left. And then when he's here alone with you, now he's suddenly gone. And I think actually the sergeant was scared of his homosexuality being discovered, which is why he was so threatening and menacing to Nick, and then later on kicked him in the face during training.
Okay, well, that's my theory. You don't have to agree to it.
Okay, all right. But picking up in the story, basically Nick goes on like a quest to find out what really happened to his friend Stassen, and Baxter actually comes back to the camp. They allow him to be a soldier again, and uh, yeah, Baxter, was it Baxter or another soldier?
And no, I think it was Baxter. You're
It
right.
was Baxter, right? But
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we skipped so many other scenes. Rewinding real quick. So there's a scene where, Nick and a few of the other soldiers are like playing volleyball, and they're talking about what they're going to do in the future and stuff like that. And all of them basically want to basically get laid, and they have girls back home that are waiting for them. And there's a scene when Stassen pretends to be a girl and flirts with one of the other guys over the volleyball net, but it's done in like a jokingly heterosexual way, like how guys pretend to be girls for a brief second to like to pretend like how you're gonna mac to this girl and stuff like that. And one of the other soldiers, who's the bully, who's usually hyper aggressive, he gets mad and walks away. And as he's walking away, the soldier that was caught being gay with the other soldier runs out of the barracks with a gun in his hand. The other sergeants and soldiers are chasing him, saying, "Put the gun down, put the gun down." And then he blows his brains out in front of all the other soldiers, in front of Stassen, in front of Nicholas, in front of Sachs, in front of everybody. So what did you think of that scene?
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting, definitely, like that bully guy, getting mad because why would he? He seems like the type of guy that will like this type of humor. But I don't know, maybe everyone in this movie is gay and they're just like trying to hide it. I'm not sure. But yeah, that was like a nice scene, where you can see a little bit of hope in these like young men. And yeah, and there's also like, of course, only the audience knows it, but there's just like a tiny bit of flirtation going on between Stassen and Nicholas, because Stassen says like, I'm gonna take you guys to the beach, or I'll take you to the beach to Nicholas, and then he says, I'll take all of you. And like, as the audience, because the camera is showing Nicholas's face, we can see like there's some sort of secret thing that they did there. And yeah, when it comes to the guy who committed suicide, that was just really cold. Like, there were no tears in that scene, no screams, nothing. And I was debating in my head if it was just what the acting or the director was lacking, or if it was, done knowingly that, yeah, like when you're in the military, it's normal to see people dying. So at this point, these young men are already brainwashed or already used to brutality. So they don't really show anything, or maybe it's just shock as well. But I wish they expanded more, maybe like show the funeral and something like that.
Right. I think that scene was very important, and it's one of the best in the film because, like you said, Nick doesn't show emotion about this. Stassen doesn't show emotion. And in fact, it seems like everybody sorts of forgets about this whole event because it's never brought up ever again. But it's important for the audience to see because, once again, the scene looks absolutely beautiful. Nice sunny day, beautiful white people playing volleyball under the sun. Yeah, we're having a good time. Oh, wait. A kid literally just killed himself because he's in this oppressive regime. Like, I feel like that was hella important for the audience to see that, to remind them that what you're seeing on screen is not great, right? These Nazis, no matter how beautiful and blonde they are not good. You get what I'm saying? So that's why I found that scene so important.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
Yeah. But moving on in the story,
Sorry,
basically, go
there
ahead.
was like another scene that we skipped. I don't know if you're getting to it, but right after Nicholas leaves the camp that they're in right now, we have the flashback.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So I was about to get to that. Thank
Okay.
you. But anyway, so yeah, there's a flashback scene of Nick being a young kid at a pool, and he's underwater, looking at all the other people who are swimming, boys, girls, everybody having a good time. He gets up, goes to his parents, and says, "I'm hungry." And his mom's like, "Okay, we're gonna leave after I finish this book." And the dad's like, "Okay, son," And the boy says, "I'm gonna go to the bathroom." He walks to the toilets. There's, grown men in the parts where he's going to pee. So he's like waiting. And as he's waiting, he sees another guy in the shower, and he's like staring at the guy while he's taking a shower. And the way the camera is angled, we can't see exactly which part of the body, Nicholas is staring at, or how exactly his facial expressions are, because it's from the profile of his face. But he is looking at the guy in the shower, right? And because we know Nicholas is gay earlier in the film, right, now it's probably assumed that this was him discovering that he is attracted to men. But then this older man comes up from behind and says, "Hey, what are you doing?" He grabs Nicholas by the arm, drags him to the office of the administrator of the pool, and says, "I caught this kid in the bathroom staring at other men." And then he started playing with himself, which didn't happen in the story. And the lady behind the counter is like, "Okay, we'll take care of it." And the man's like, "No, no, no. I want to talk to this kid's father because I take my son here and we shouldn't have little freaks like this here." Nicholas's father comes. And by the way, it's Nicholas's biological dad, not his stepdad, who comes. He confronts the man who touched his son, who touched Nicholas, and he fights him. And we don't see the actual fight. It's done through the mirror, but we hear them fighting and stuff like that. Nicholas's father comes and saves him, puts him into the car, and they drive off. And that's the end of the memory. What did you think about that scene?
Yeah, like how we read in the review, that this was one of the only dives into Nicholas's history or what he might be thinking about. And I really like this scene because also from the review as well, it shows like how cultural homophobia is, because you have this young, very, very young, like child, and you can easily assume him of like being gay or looking at someone's private parts. That's usually not the first thing that will come to your head, I feel like, when you see a child, because children are curious and they might just be looking as well. But yeah, that was definitely one thing I thought about. And also thinking about how his father and mother reacted, I felt like they were protective of him. Possibly, I'm thinking they didn't talk about this situation ever, but they weren't also like, "Oh, like you're the F word and, you're gay, you cannot be in this family." I don't think there was that sort of thing, but there wasn't also confrontation as well.
I would disagree with that a bit, because I think that scene there might have been an allusion to Nick feeling like his parents divorced because of him. And I think maybe he thinks about that event a lot and was like, what if that never happened? Maybe my parents would still be together. Because out of all the memories he had, that one must have been the most traumatic. And it takes place with both of his parents, his biological parents there. So I think maybe, this did cause a rift between his mom and his dad. Maybe his mom accepted him, but his father didn't. Or maybe his father did, but his mother didn't, and stuff like that. Who knows? What do you think?
Yeah, that could be true as well. I just didn't see like his father going off on him. And yeah, he did rush and he was socially pressured to get out of that situation. But yeah, I don't know. I just got the idea that his father was more understanding than his stepfather if this were to come out, for example. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. But very powerful scene. The reviewer said he didn't like this choice of Summer Breeze, but Summer Breeze is one of my favorite songs, and I thought it was actually good. Music in this film was generally good, I would say. I like
Yeah.
the choice. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Moving on in the film, basically, Nick comes back to camp. He's trying to look for Stassen. The gay guy who, didn't kill himself returns back to camp, and Nick asks him, "Hey, where's Stassen?" And the guy says, eventually, like, he's in this place called Ward 22, which is, where they send all the homosexual people. And Nick, basically confronts the guy who's telling him this information and says, "Hey, I'm not like you." He grabs him up by the collar and says, "I'm not gay," basically, and then walks away. And then there's a scene later where all the guys are in the barracks, getting drunk, fighting, laughing, joking all the time. And there's this montage of like Nick being underwater, but under cloudy, dirty water, right? And he's sort of like floating in it while this montage of the boys fighting and stuff like that happens until one of the boys like shoots himself, basically. And then Nick comes up after the gunshot and we see that he's swimming in some lake in South Africa with all the other soldiers. And then the scene shows like 8 months later. Yeah. Any comments about, those two scenes?
Yeah, I think at this point it's just really obvious that Nick is trying to protect himself and he's not willing to take any chances of like getting beaten, getting tortured. And yeah, like he misses Stassen. He doesn't know like what is happening to him. He's probably very afraid. And also I think it was then when they showed like what was happening to Stassen as well. So yeah, that's what I was feeling. Like he was just full on afraid and he was just trying to survive basically. Yeah. And then the guy who accidentally shot himself in the foot or something, that's stupid. And I feel like that happens to at least like one guy in every group. There's like this always one guy who accidentally shoots himself. I don't know why. Yeah, I don't know that. And I felt like that drowning scene, it was sort of like, he's around all this attractive young men that he could have sex with, but he can't. And he has to oppress every single feeling that he has. So maybe that's why he was feeling like he was under muddy water.
Don't you think it's a bit homophobic to think like Nick just wanted to have sex with a bunch of different guys? I don't think he was like sexually aroused being there. I think it
Yeah,
was a bit repressed.
yeah. I shouldn't have said that. I meant like, he can have relations or romantic relationships. Or he could at least like try and, be adventurous, but he can't actually.
I get what you're saying. I just don't feel like Nick is like this sexual deviant. Like, it's easy for us not being gay people to think like, okay, gay guys just want to suck and duck, right? But nah, I think he was just more like buried under all of the things he had to keep inside. And yeah, I think an interesting thing, if I'm going to put myself in the mind of a white gay male, right, especially in this white supremacist world, explicitly in this film, I think the double consciousness of being in the room but also out of the room is a big part of the motivating factors for how Nick acts with not only Stassen but also the other soldiers, right? Because white gay men, you're a part of the power establishment except for that one thing. And a lot of the times people assume that one thing is going to be a behavioral thing because being gay, some people say, is a choice. Or you might be gay, but you're making the choice to do gay acts. So Nick seems to be fighting that urge to, participate in the type of activity that puts him in the out group, but at the same time, he wants all the benefits of being a part of the dominant power structure, which is why he grabs that guy and shakes him up and says, I'm not like you. I'm not a Moffie like you, right? And that's why he does take the first swing at Stassen because, he wants to be a part of that system. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, that was a really good point. Definitely. And, I mean, yeah, everyone wants to be part of the winning team, quote unquote. And yeah, maybe that conflict was weighing in on him in his consciousness.
Yeah, I was thinking about this when I was watching YouTube a few days ago, right? There's this white guy talking about like city planning in, I don't know, Nashville, Tennessee or something like that. And, you know, a lot of our white men in America, they're basically just like right-wing nut jobs, right? They don't care about any sort of progressive politics. The only good white men in general, by and large, in America are like gay white men, because gay white men understand what it means to be on the outside, and to have progress makes it better for not only their lives, but everybody, right? But at the same time, we also have problematic gay white men in America who work against the interests of not only their community, but everybody else. And it's such an interesting thing because, like, you know, you are so close to power, but you have a part of yourself that the white supremacists who are fascists will never accept. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, it's a dog eat dog world, so I guess like I can't blame them for trying to survive, but at the same time, it's very hypocritical that they are, actually supposed to be fighting the same enemy, but they're not doing that. Instead, they're supporting the enemy, which is also putting down them as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just very paradoxical, very ironic. Yeah.
Right, because they view it as degeneracy, right? And I hate this word so much because they view anything that strays away from the norm as degeneracy. But yeah, basically, you know, the film sort of loses its plot because I didn't know exactly where it was going. You know, I didn't know that the boys would actually end up going to the border, which is what happens after we see the 8 months later text pop up on screen. The boys are then shipped to the front lines, and yeah, they make it there. And the guys that they meet at the camp, the grown men, they're not like the drill sergeant, right? These guys have beards. They look rough. They're like burnt by the sun. The boys hop off of the bus, and the soldier in the crow's nest is like shooting his rifle in the air. It looked like Vietnam vets who just got shipped to like South Africa to finish their tour of duty. And yeah, the soldiers who just made it from camp, the kids that we've been seeing on screen for the past 40 minutes, try to like salute the guy who's the commander of this post, and he's like, "We don't need any of that here." And yeah, he gives them a tour of the place, and we see that there are black people basically kept like slaves in like this broken down house near the base camp. So like they're using black people sort of like mules that do like, I guess, the cleaning, the cooking, and the guarding and stuff like that. And then we also see at the camp that they also have some black soldiers as well, you know, who are working with the apartheid regime, which I just thought was fascinating. And I wish they explored that more, like having Nick talk to one of those guys or something like that. But what did you think when they made it to the border and they're introduced to these other soldiers who are like doing morphine and, you know, looking like they don't care about the military at all? They're just trying to survive.
Yeah, I think there is like a really sad fact that you can see, as soon as they arrived at the camp, you see like these hostages who are black people, and they are like families. They're children there. They show like a face of an old woman, and you can definitely see like, war is not for these people. Like these people don't want to cause war. They don't want to like fight anyone. They're just like little kids, old grandmas, grandpas, whatever. And that was definitely very a striking image that I remember from the movie. And also about the men who were doing morphine and all sorts of things. They were kind of like the same with those black people. Like they didn't want to be there, and instead, they were sort of pushed into that position, and they just are, again, trying to survive and not being courageous enough to, stand up against the regime. And they're just like dulling themselves basically in order to, survive this monstrosity.
Now, I think one of the guys who we see doing morphine was actually the gay guy that Nick spoke to earlier about Stassen's whereabouts. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, he didn't want to be there, like you said, but he was also trying to numb the pain, right? Because they offered Nick some morphine and they said, it's not because we're in physical pain, like we're in mental pain or something like that. They don't exactly say it in those words, but that's the implication. I was thinking about when they showed up at the camp, I was like, war is hell. Have you heard that phrase before?
Of course.
Yeah, and it's like how we in society, we idealize war. We think going to war is heroic. But then when you actually see real soldiers on the front lines in the trenches, it's nothing like that. They're just trying to survive, and it does corrupt you, like on the inside and outside. And which is what those soldiers at the border actually looked like. They looked like they had been corrupted and that they're not the valiant heroes that we imagine they are. Yeah, later on, the guys are like, touring, and scouting the area around the camp, trying to, push back against the border. And, as they're scouting, we see that, there's a black soldier like leading them, which is funny to me because like the black soldier is standing in front of all the white soldiers. So if they do get ambushed, he's going to be the first one shot. And you said it was so sad seeing the Africans there. I was just so pissed seeing the Africans because you already know how I feel about the Africans who, basically bend over backwards for white people. Like, we would not even be enslaved. We would have not been colonized if the Tanzanians didn't see them and say, Jumbo, welcome, Karibu. You get what I'm saying? Am I tripping? Am I wrong for that? Because I was internally fighting myself inside from screaming at the Africans.
Well, there were two types of black people in the camp. The one I was talking about were the hostages that were being held there or being used as slaves against their own will. And the guy who was the soldier and was showing them the way, the black guy who was doing that, like, yes, that shouldn't be happening. That's like the same thing what Nicholas is doing, right? He's trying to act not gay, and it feels like that black guy was trying to act like he's trying to support the white dudes, the anti-communists, the racists, and he's basically letting himself being used by them. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that is fucked up. But just like Nick, he's also trying to reach for the power as well. And but don't say that because like you're using, like when you gave that example of Tanzanians, you're using the same argument that white supremacists use. So don't say that.
I get you. It's just still so frustrating because like in Africa, they outnumber the white man 1,000,000 to 1. And the reason they were able to brutalize us from Brazil to Canada is because we were always the minority. And it's just so frustrating to be like, you really let the South Africans put up that much of a fight. You really had to go to war with the Rhodesians. You really had to struggle to get back Namibia. And when there's like 5 white guys. Now I know it could be the same could be said like today, like the Arabs are trying to get back Palestine from the Israelis. And there's 10 million Jews and 100 million Arabs. But still, that should even frustrate the Arabs. Like, that's how I'm coming from. That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, but like it doesn't end with just like Afrikaners. There is some other force behind them, like Britain, like, Dutch and all sorts of things. Like, it's not really just them. They are being provided ammunition, tactics, I don't know, different types of things that maybe the African soldiers didn't have the chance to. So you have to look at both sides, and you also have to accept, like, there are bad people amongst black people as well. Like, there are going to be traitors among black people as well. You cannot just put every, like, one of those black people in the same category.
That is a good point. Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan both gave funding to apartheid South Africa. Yeah. Ain't that the truth? It wasn't until the end of the Soviet Union that they said, you know what, maybe apartheid is bad, okay? maybe we should not fund this genocidal racist regime. I don't know. But that actually goes a bit deeper if you think about it. If there was an end to Islam, do you think that the West might stop supporting Israel? Like if all the Arabs collectively said, yeah, let's all be humanist vegans from now on. do you think the West would say, okay, we don't need to fight back the barbarians anymore?
Wow, I don't know if it will stop at Islam. Because let's be real, I don't think the real issue is Islam, even though it might be like a very huge curtain to cover it all. Because I don't
Then what
know.
is it then?
I
Because
mean,
we know the white supremacists don't love Jews, and they only they've had a problem with the Muslims since y'all took Byzantine. So
yeah, it's about power. It's about, and all the other things are being used as a cover for power, just like how race is being used for that, and how like religion is being used for that, how gender is being used for that.
mm.
Like, and all of them are covers. Like, race is not real, but it is real. It is made real,
Okay,
basically.
but then what would be the real thing that would tie the West to Israel?
Power.
Or what power? They would. Who has more power? Okay, unified Arabs who are no longer Muslim and they're no longer culturally opposed to us, theologically opposed to
It's
us.
basically they have a handyman in the Middle East by having Israel, which gives
Right,
them power.
right. But they also have Saudi Arabia. They also have, Jordan. They also have Egypt.
Yeah, but those countries have something that ties them with other nations, which is Islam.
Right, but they also have tons of oil, geographic, strategic locations.
Are you talking about America has tons of oil?
No, I'm saying those Arab nations have a ton of land, ton of
Yeah,
geographically
but
important locations, and a ton of resources as well.
I'm saying because they share Islam together with other nations in like the Middle East and the Arab world, they could switch sides. And like you said, they are strong, so they can afford to switch sides for Islam, for Deen.
No, but
So,
you're missing the point, actually. What I'm saying here, and this is tied to this film, is that if those Arab nations stopped being Muslim, would then the West say, we don't need to really support Israel like the way it needs to be supported?
and I'm saying I don't think it's actually about religion. I think it's about keeping power.
Okay, but why do they want the Israelis to keep power when they wouldn't then support the Arabs, who would then not be Muslim?
Because Israelis wouldn't really support any other group other than themselves. So
I'm
it's
talking
like,
about the West supporting Israel.
okay, I'm saying that West is keeping Israel close because they know that Israel is the minority, sort of like the underdog, but a powerful underdog. So they're keeping them close, where like country like Saudi Arabia can switch sides and support other nations because they can afford to do that.
No, but actually, I'm saying, like, okay, the West is supporting Israel because they're powerful, but they're supporting them. Why? Why are they supporting them? You're just saying they're supporting them because they're powerful, but is it
Because they
not
want
that
to
they're? Go ahead.
because they want to keep them on their side. They want to keep a group of people that doesn't have any alliances on their side.
Right, but the thing is, they're fighting also to keep back the hordes of Muslims. Right, they don't want to see Arabs all unified, all together in Palestine, from Syria to Morocco and Jordan to Iraq, whatever. Like they don't want to see them all together, and that's one of the big reasons, right? Because the Muslims are terrorists, the Muslims are extremists in the minds of the West. So why
Yeah.
not then support the Jews who are, pretty white, similar to the West, have European backgrounds by and large, and, they're not going to be as hostile to us.
And you think if they're not Muslim, if they change their Muslim identity, that's not going to continue?
Well, that's the question. That was the question,
I
yes.
think it will continue because I don't think it has to do with their religion specifically. I'm saying like their religion is like just an excuse.
But the West does have issues with Islam. So if it's not Islam, then what is it?
I think it's about keeping the power in that region.
Just keeping the power balance as it is, with Israel dominating over them?
Yeah, because I mean, whichever group sort of, you know, has to get out of Palestine, then it's on America again, or European Union, or whatever
On
group
them
they
to do
have.
what?
What?
On them to do what? You said whoever gets out of Palestine, it's on them.
To
It's
take
on
care
you.
of it. Because they get involved in everything.
Okay, but so
Okay.
what are you saying? I don't understand what the hell you're saying.
I don't know either now, because it's just like on and on and on. So maybe we can continue with the movie.
All right. Anyway, the point I was trying to get at there is that, in South Africa, they were supported by the West until communism fell because they were supporting apartheid because at least they were anti-communist. Meanwhile, many other nations in Africa were becoming socialists, like Mozambique, like Angola, and many other places had socialist movements, right? So I was just thinking about possibilities for what would need to happen in our modern world to make some things that are wrong right. But anyway, the young boys are out there scouting one night, and they're attacked by a group of rebels in the dark. Um, the sergeant is actually there with them, doing the scouting when they're attacked, and the sergeant is trying to control his boys, but they don't listen to him. I believe one of the guys, storms ahead like he's Rambo into the night and shoots his gun in the air and just runs to a hill, and he makes it, and then the other soldiers follow him. They don't listen to the sergeant, which I thought was interesting. And basically, they start scouting into the woods. Moffie gets confronted by a black rebel soldier, and he shoots him dead. And Moffie stands over this young man as he takes his last breath. But at the same time, one of the soldiers in his group is killed, and I'm not exactly sure who was killed. I don't know if it was Sax or if it was the hypermasculine soldier that had beef with Moffie when he first Moffie, I mean Nick, when he first showed up at the camp. And I'm still confused by that. But yeah, the next day, Nick is like, recovering from the fights, and he goes to lay down in the sun, and the sergeant like leans down over him, looks Nick in the face, shakes his head, and sort of just like walks away. And Nick just, sort of leans up and wonders what that was about. What did you think about, those two scenes?
Yeah, definitely, like, the war scene was powerful, because I think killing another person has a big, big, big impact on, a human being. And I just felt like that's what we were seeing a little bit, like just that trauma being created for Nick. But at the same time, once again, I feel like we didn't get enough emotion out of Nick. And then again, the next day, he's just like laying down, sunbathing. It's like he's the one that killed a person the night before. And that was lacking a little bit. And when his sergeant came to him, I felt like he was sort of communicating without communicating the fact that, like, yeah, like, this is war. This is what happens at war. And I'm glad that you're, like, being able to handle it. I felt like that's what the sergeant was trying to do. But it almost felt like sergeant was, like, more sad than Nick. I don't know. But yeah, that's how I felt about that whole scene.
I felt like, once again, that whoever got killed, it should have been more obvious who it was, like a close up on his face and the expression on his face we could see. I really wish we got to see that. I feel like when the sergeant kneeled over Nick, he was actually a bit disappointed that they didn't listen to his orders. Or he was actually glad they didn't listen to his orders. But I don't know. I don't know exactly what to think because there is no dialogue, and I felt like there should have been some conversation there in this film. I know this film is based on a book. Maybe in real life the sergeant didn't say anything, but we're making a movie here, and we're trying to grasp this emotion. Like, talk about it. Like, don't pour your heart out. I wasn't expecting the sergeant to cry, but say something, right, that we could read into and discuss and debate. Until then, we could just say, yeah, I think the sergeant was actually horny. I think the sergeant was just constipated. I think the sergeant really just had to fart, and he let out a silent one and then smirked in Nick's face as he walked away. Like, we don't know exactly what he said or why that scene was even there.
Wow, okay, that was crazy. Yeah, I think I felt like it was sucks, but I'm not sure. Once again, like you said, dialogue would have been great. I do agree on that.
Yeah. Moving on in the film, basically, Nick goes and meets up with his stepdad and his mom at a fancy restaurant, and they're happy that their son finally made it out the military. His stepdad asked, how was it? And he said, like, it was okay, I guess. Then later on, Nick meets up with his real dad, and I guess he moved in and to live with his dad. And that makes me believe that secretly Nick wanted to have a better relationship with his father, and maybe his father supported him at the pool scene more than his mother, but he still ended up living with his mom, and that's why at the beginning of the film he said, I'm trying to run away from here. I think because you notice he didn't call his stepdad dad, he called him Pete, or like Peter or something like that. But when he sees his real father, he gives him a real hug. And even though they don't have a very deep conversation, sitting at the dinner table, you know, Nick and his father seem to, get along better, even though it seems like, Nick is like a little bit shell shocked by what he saw on the front line. So then later on, Nick like hops into his car and goes to Stassen's house and meets up with his parents. And then Stassen and him go to the beach. And as they're at the beach, they jump into the cold waters of the Atlantic, because I believe this is in the Western Cape. And when they're in the water, Nick tries to hold Stassen's hand, but Stassen doesn't reciprocate. And then Stassen says, it's too cold for me. I got to get out. Nick meets up with him on the shores, and then they're sitting in silence again. And then Stassen says, I have to go pee. And he goes to piss. Nick lays down on the beach for a good 2 or 3 minutes. And then he's still waiting there for Stassen. And Stassen doesn't appear again. And then the film fades to black. What did you think about, the ending of the movie?
Yeah, I definitely thought Nick blamed some of the things he went through on his stepdad a little bit. I don't know why, but maybe because his stepdad was this sort of like more masculine, more, go Afrikaner type of guy. Or maybe that's just the vibe it gave off. And yeah, I did feel like he was trying to rekindle his relationship with his dad as well. And talking about the last scene and how they met up, it's like very, very open to interpretation because, okay, so I was thinking, okay, nobody can see them, but they still don't do anything. So maybe what happened to Stassen in Ward 22 is just really, really bad. And he's so brainwashed, so afraid that, he cannot dare to do anything, even though no one is there and they're not in the military anymore. But then you also think, will they get over it? So, and like when he went to the bathroom, I was thinking, did he escape or is he going to come back? Like, did he just leave Nicholas there? I don't know. I didn't know. So yeah, it was a bit like just up in the air.
Yeah, the film definitely loses points with the ending. There's just too much of, once again, racism by Ralph Lauren, apartheid by Chanel. Like, there's just too much, like, model-esque, beautiful scenery, close-ups of these, chiseled young men's faces, and not enough actual exploration of who they are or what they're feeling or thinking, right? Like, I was just dying for one of those burst open emotional moments, right? Or just having that real conversation, because the last scene when Nick and Stassen are at the beach, they're literally all alone. There's not a soul around them. And this is the first time in the film, basically, where it's empty space with Nick and another person. And there's nothing there, right? It makes me think about also a scene that was earlier in the film when Nick went into the bathroom and started like beating his meat. He was jerking off, but we don't know exactly what he was jerking off to. Like, was he jerking off to like thoughts of women to try to like make himself straight? Was he jerking off to thoughts of Stassen because he missed his homie and he wanted that bussy? We don't know. Like, I wish there was that, like, something more definitive here. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely. And it could have been like the touch of a hand. It could have been like just, I don't know, Nick laying his head on Stassen's shoulder or vice versa. Just something to give us a bit more of a resolution would have been great.
Yeah, but once again, I don't think it should have been anything physical. It should have been words. Like, they needed to have that conversation for the audience. And this is how I wish it went. I wish it was like Stassen said, Nick, I'm jealous of you because you made it. You have the same problem I have, but you didn't betray God. You didn't betray your country. You didn't let us down. And then Nick says, but I killed a man and I cannot get the look out of his eyes. And, like, that would have been way more powerful, right? Something like that. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, if that conversation happened, it would have also drove home, like, the racism part as well.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit. So, yeah, that would have
Yeah,
been
but I
good.
killed a man and I will never be forgiven.
Yeah.
And my, like something like that. That would have been much more, that would have tied a lot of things together. Or
Yeah.
like or making it full circle, Nick looks out on the ocean and says, you know what? I used to try to run away from here and stuff like that. But, now I really want to run away, but I want to do it with you or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. No, that would have been definitely good.
Yeah. But, overall, it's so hard to rate this film because it's one of the best looking films we've had here. But there's so much that I really hate about it as well. The lack of dialogue, the lack of emphasis on sending home a clear message to the audience, not making it too interpretive. Because clips of this film could be chopped up by like white supremacists who want to make a reminder of like how beautiful South Africa was before the end of apartheid, you know? So I don't know. I'm giving it a 6.5. That's my landing on it. What do you think?
My final decision is going to be 7.
Okay.
Because
Okay,
I
fine.
do agree with your points. I did think, like, there could have been more exploration of some of the characters, more exploration for Nicholas, for Stassen, for Socks. And, yeah, like, the ending was just, you know, up in the air, too much up in the air for me, as well as some scenes as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like, the scenery is great, and the shots are good, cinematography is good, but yeah, I mean, I'm gonna give it a 7 because of
Give it a
those
7.
reasons. Yeah.
All right. Which is a better film, Valley of a Thousand Hills or Moffie?
I said Moffie before.
You can stand on it.
I don't know if I want to now that we discussed it.
It's okay. It's all right. Nobody's
No,
judging
I
you.
know it's okay. I know. No, I would have said it if I 100% thought like that, but now I'm kind of second guessing myself.
Okay. So
I don't know. Okay, I guess I'm gonna say Valley of Thousand Hills.
no, guys, this is what pussy looks like.
No, I did say before Simon asked me this question, and I said Moffie was a better movie because I do admire the cinematography and sort of like a deeper emotion, I guess. And Valley of the Thousand Hills does have that cheesy, dramatic touch to it, which I am not the biggest fan of because of Turkish movies. So yeah, that's why I was choosing Moffie. But now that we talked about it, for me, it feels like Moffie has more, you know, downfalls.
I see. I think Valley of a Thousand Hills is a much, much better film because, it has great acting, a lot of expression and a lot of emotion, touches on similar themes about coming of age and societal pressures and homophobia and living your truth as a gay person, but it's executed much, much better. They both have, endings that struggle, but the ending of Moffie is just too open, and the ending of Valley of a Thousand Hills is a bit too tight, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. But now I do agree on you with that.
Okay. But, so, like I said, we are going to review also briefly this documentary that I highly suggest anybody who watches Moffie also look at, and it's called Fatherland. You can find it on YouTube very easily. Just type in South Africa Fatherland documentary, and it's published under the channel Journeyman. And I'm going to be reading from an article on the focuspoll.com that reviews this film, and then AKDI and I are going to give our just reactions to it. So this was published by Janek Parrish on June 22nd, 2014. The critic gave this documentary an eight, which is a very good score, I would say, for a documentary. So, Fatherland is a 2013 South African documentary that follows a group of boys as they go through a military-style camp in the South African bush. Unbeknownst to the boys prior to their arrival, the camp serves not only as a sort of military experience boot camp, but also an indoctrination camp, teaching the boys that the post-1994 South Africa they've grown up in is dangerous and oppressive to their Boer roots, and that they must maintain loyalty to Boers first, and anything else second. Over time, the boys become more and more convinced that Colonel Franz Jutz, a former officer in the pre-1994 South African Defense Force, is saying about blacks being a menace is true. By the end of the film, they are echoing these racist sentiments, leaving the viewer to wonder what exactly the future of these boys, but also South Africa is. There's a great deal to love in this film. The shots are extremely well done, especially considering that in many cases, the camera must follow the boys into the forest and across mud. The filmmakers also make a good sense of what to do to capture a given moment, sometimes using glorious swooping shots to create the idea of the emptiness around the camps, and at other points, zooming in to create a sense of the claustrophobia and xenophobia. However, the heart of the film is in the story of the boys and the camp itself. In one sense, the story of the camp is spectacularly well done. The frustration, confusion, and sheer emotion of these boys is well conveyed, and the audience is able to hang on to their struggles, suffering, and feeling alongside them. There is a very real sense of rooting for these boys and hoping they don't succumb, though the inevitability of it remains clear as well. This is a camp designed to instill racist values, and no amount of sympathy on the part of the audience will change it. The fact that the backgrounds of the boys are shown as well does a great deal to humanize them and paint the camp as an ambiguous place. One man, Jonker, is a recovering drug addict for whom the camp represents a chance at making a better life for himself and his family. For others, it's a chance to know what their fathers went through in the border war, as well as a chance to speak Afrikaans and get in touch with their heritage and history, albeit through an entirely biased perspective. The question that the film raises is an entirely valid one. At what point, the film asks, does nationalism turn into racism? It doesn't offer an answer, nor should it. The power of the film lies in the audience and their ability to decide for themselves that what Afrikaans nationalism is and means in the new South Africa. For the critic, the question is a profoundly difficult one, as Boer nationalism in South Africa is inextricably linked with apartheid and its legacy. But at the same time, there is a unique culture, language, and people that ought not to be shoved into the rubbish bins in the name of historical injustice. The fact that this question is so well raised and ambiguously discussed is a testament to Crossman's ability to tell the story of identity in post-1994 South Africa. Equally, the fact that the question is left up to the audience to decide makes the film far more powerful and meaningful than if the film had chosen to espouse a certain side. Perhaps the major failing of the film is its length and the abruptness of its ending. After so much time spent engrossed in the lives and struggles of these boys, the film skips straight to the end as the boys embrace Colonel Juice's racist ideas. Their transition isn't shown as well as it could be, detracting from the effectiveness of the film and its message. Instead of making the danger of these views clear, it instead seems to show that these views were there all along, something which does no one any favors in the debates about racial politics in South Africa. Overall, Fatherland is a stellar documentary which, other than a few snags at the end, does an excellent job of presenting the question of identity in South Africa in an interesting and new way. Rather than beating the audience over the head with any particular view, it instead allows them to think about the issue, trusting in their ability to come to a good conclusion. It's refreshing, and this critic is looking forward to seeing more of Crossman's work in the future. What did you think of that review?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good review. It sums it up well. And the question that it's talking about is very powerful because, yeah, that is sort of like, I think, the point where those sort of white supremacist extremists and, people who stand up for equality sort of clash. So it is a good question, and yes, it is covered in the documentary. Though, like, my thing is, I don't know if the documentary is that strongly saying, everything that is happening here is bad. I'm not sure if it can convey the same message to all of the audience,
No, I
So
think
that's my one problem with the documentary.
No, I think this film, much more so than Moffie, is explicitly showing the evil that is their ideology. I think the only people that would look at Fatherland and say that these people are, right in what they're doing are people who are implicitly or explicitly, uh, racist, right? Or people who believe, yeah, there is a genocide in South Africa against white people. Ever since the black people came in power, there's just been, so much evil things that have happened to the white people there. Somebody needs to protect them, or they need to protect themselves. I think this one is more explicit. What do you think?
Yeah, compared to Mofi, it does focus more on racism and indoctrination of like these white supremacists and like pro-apartheid, ideas. But just because it focuses on those ideas, I don't know if it's necessarily like, saying that they are bad. Yes, like, there's like very, very extreme ideas in here, but I feel like someone could look at it and say, like, yes, you cannot go this far to say like black people are this, black people are that. But oh, like maybe there's a point here, maybe there's a point there. I don't
Uh,
think, like a person, I think like there could be some middle ground that people can get out of this.
Wow, I'm really surprised that's your interpretation because in the film, these little kids on the first night of being at, Nazi camp, they're, marching and shouting and, parading all day. And then at night, when they're tired and beat, the colonel comes up and starts playing movies and reading from books that, yeah, black people have smaller brains than white people. Black people are naturally more violent. In our country, there's 60 homicides a day and all the criminals are black. Like the film, it's a documentary that's, covering a week into an hour. So of course they're not going to show all the propaganda these kids are fed. But yeah, like throughout the film is pretty damn racist, and there is no middle ground. I don't see how you're seeing middle ground here. What am I missing? Like where people can say, oh, maybe they have some rights to their nation, and maybe they have, some good points. What good points did the Afrikaners make here?
I didn't say Afrikaners made good points. I'm saying that some people might perceive it that way, and
Yeah, and
there
the
are a
people that
lot
will
of
perceive it are racist already.
yeah, and I'm saying like it doesn't make it that obvious that racism is bad. That's what I'm saying.
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm not saying like they had a right to saying any of the racist thing they said. They weren't right. But I'm just saying there are a lot of people that, say I'm not racist or they're not explicitly racist but have racist thoughts,
Hmm.
and think like black people are this, black people are that. When these people watch this movie, they might say to some points like, oh, maybe they're right.
Hmm.
Those people can say that. It's not me thinking that Afrikaners are right in this
Right.
documentary.
Right, right. And by the way, not all Afrikaners are racist, but I would not be surprised if there's like some overlap with our old white men that we have in America and the old white Afrikaner men of South Africa who probably missed the past. They missed those days when everything was, separate but equal, but crime was low because they had a genocidal, apartheid, wicked regime running things. But, I think this film is a bit more, it's able to tackle the racism within their organization or within this ideology, because it's not concerned also with the homophobia as well. I believe there are a few comments here and there from the colonels and stuff like, we don't want gays, or, homosexuality is wrong and stuff like that. But yeah, the majority of the comments by the guys who are leading is like, South Africa is at war. We're preparing for a race war. The lizards, who are black people, they're committing mass crimes. And we need to do something to protect ourselves and protect our people and our culture. So yeah, that's what I'm getting from this.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, what I thought. I don't think it's giving the same message for every audience, and that's like my only problem with it. But for the most part, like from my point of view, I do think it did a great job of like, yeah, conveying that apartheid is bad and racism is bad, because that's also my worldview as well.
Right. But it was also, there were parts of it that were a bit silly too. Like there was a scene when one of the kids, his dad came up there to like pick him up to go on vacation. And the colonel got mad when he saw the father, and he was like, "How did you know we were up here?" And the guy was like, "Well, yeah, the black people below the hill, they said, yeah, there's white people up there pretending to be soldiers. So they said that they will take me to you if I just give them $1,000 or 1,000 South African rand." So I let them hop in my car and I let them point it out to where you were. And the colonel was like disappointed. He was like, "Oh, okay." Like kind of embarrassed in a certain way. But it was so funny because like this black man had to help this white man pick up his kids from racist boot camp. And you let him sit in your car, possibly with you and your wife, and there was no racism there when you needed to find your kids, right? But you send your kids to this camp where they're being taught that black people have tinier muscles in their ears and smaller brains than white people. I thought that was like one of the ironies of this film that was so kind of funny. What do you think?
Yeah, no, there were definitely like those cringe moments for the generals. Like they were just sort of embarrassed. Also, I thought the same thing when one of the generals was talking about his old war memories, and he said like, you see this bullet wound there, and I was like, where? Because he was just fat, and no bullet wound was to be seen in his belly, and then he started crying and stuff. So like those scenes, like, yeah, I was thinking, okay, maybe this is effective on little boys, but it was just sort of pathetic looking at this grown man showing his war scar, quote unquote, and then like it's not there because he ate too much bacon.
Now, I actually like that scene when the guy starts crying, because I feel like that guy was like an inch away from death. And when you're looking God in the eyes, when you see that big bright light, that tunnel, you're thinking like, I just want to live. And your life flashes before your eyes. And the last thing you're thinking about is racism or anything like that. So there was those tears coming down his eyes because he remembered that feeling of almost being on the other side. But then when he came back to our world, he was like, "Yep, time to be racist again." And it was just like a big tragedy, I guess. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean that goes to show you like really who are you fighting for, because yeah, I don't know. It feels like really stupid for me that like people who have these compassionate thoughts about war and fighting, and
Yeah.
yeah, no matter how many wars you have, you're never gonna wipe out all of the blacks from Earth,
Hmm.
or for any race. You can say that. Like that just doesn't make sense.
Now, this film, Fatherland, sort of has a main character in Sparky. And Sparky is like this little kid. Like he can not be any more than like 14 or something. He's got like little buck teeth. He doesn't have any facial hair, little freckles on his face. Just like a cute looking kid. But he unfortunately was born in this like very hyper religious family that follows this Afrikaners organization, I believe the Afrikaners Defense Fund or Force or something like that, which has a symbol like a swastika. Oh God. And his parents don't let him, watch TV or play video games. He just has like a few DVDs, and then they make him like go outside and like cut down trees and do carpentry and stuff like that. And they pray all the time. And, Sparky is like the smallest kid in the group, and he often cannot complete the activities. And, some people feel like, Sparky, you gotta man up and you gotta be tougher and stuff like that. What did you feel of like Sparky's character in or person in this film?
At the beginning, I liked Sparky. Like, I was sort of rooting for him. They were making him do really challenging things, and then his arm got hurt, but he didn't accept help from anyone. It just gave me, like, I don't want to say this, but it almost reminded me of my own little brother, because they're, like, about the same age. Obviously not in ideology, but in terms of just, like, how he was acting. And I always also thought, people who are, especially like kids, who are born in that sort of very oppressive environment would want to get out of it. But it was very interesting that Sparky had no interest in getting out of it. He was completely happy with how his life was. He wasn't curious about anything outside of what his family gave him.
Now, I have a few things I want to say. Number one, Sparky's parents, when they're interviewed, they say, we're not racist. It's not about race. We just want to protect our culture. But then they shoot over to Sparky a few scenes later, and Sparky's like, I don't have any black friends. If a black man tries to talk to me, I'll walk away or I'll fight him and stuff like that. So I'm like, okay, your parents definitely are racist. They're teaching you some wild stuff in the house. Secondly, I was like, Sparky, yeah, he does come across like the underdog, but you then have to question yourself, wait, this kid is at Nazi training camp. Why is he the underdog of anything? And it's because we're so conditioned in this white supremacist world that when we see cute little white kids doing something, we take away all the maliciousness or the evil of any group that they're participating in. Because this Sparky was sent to, I don't know, Islamic jihadi summer school. If Sparky was sent to Al-Qaeda daycare, we would be saying that's child abuse. This is horrific. But because it's cute little Sparky, going to the Afrikaners shooting club, we think, oh, that's okay. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, it was definitely a disappointment, just like how he turned out to be racist. And it was just very, very just sad about the future, the way like he came out, and he didn't seem like that innocent person anymore, and he was just like, yeah, like I'll kill a black person, da 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 da. So yeah, it was just very, very unpleasant.
And you notice that, when they're interviewing the kids, there are some kids who are like, I believe some of what the colonel says, and other ones who say, I don't, right? But we see Sparky struggle throughout the week he's there. He can barely keep up with the kids when they're lifting and running. And then at the end, he's the one who says the most racist stuff. He says, I hate black people. I don't care who sees this. Like, he was standing on business for real. Sparky said, I don't care who sees it. I hate black people. I love Afrikaners and basically F black people, right? And I was
Yeah.
like, isn't that so typical of the white supremacists? The ones who are the weakest, the ones who are the most feeble, the ones who have the least capability to actually, perform their masculinity in the traditional ways, they then become the most virulent racists. They become the ones who are the most committed to the ideology because their bodies cannot maintain, their standing. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's definitely that inferiority complex. And it was also like in other characters as well, like with the guy who was a drug addict. I felt like he also had an inferiority complex because he said something like, okay, so he was a drug addict for the most of his youth, and then he tried to clean up, and that's why sort of he ended up in the army, or this army camp thing, not actual army. And he was like older than the other kids there. So he had a wife, he had a kid, but he didn't accomplish anything in his life. And he was telling something about like, if I wanted to work in the mines, they would first hire a black man because it's colored privilege. And then they would then hire his wife and then his children and then me. So he also definitely had that inferiority complex. And once again, I think it's also like people like Sparky, they're also being indoctrinated by their parents constantly. It's like, I felt like maybe he was homeschooled or something. So whatever information they get, especially from people who look powerful, I feel like they just soak that up and think that person is like a god, like a prophet, and they're so smart. And that's also what he was saying, like the coroner is so smart. I cannot say that word. Colonel. The Colonel.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah. Anyway, do you think this sort of conditioning into racism works the same way with women?
Like women can get conditioned into being racist?
I'll repeat the question. Do you think women can be conditioned into being racist the same way these boys were?
Yeah, I think so. But maybe using like different tools, because here they are using manliness and sort of that like boyhood friendship that they have, but women can be done the same, but maybe using motherhood, using femininity and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
you know, constantly being taught to, I don't know, be afraid of black men, or thinking that black men are this or that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Like the trad wives, right? I guess
Yeah.
trad wives might be the equivalent of, Boer, Boer racist summer camp.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um, Another thing I want to pick up on this film is that, I feel like with Moffie, we turn off the movie and we know that those characters eventually kind of like lost the war, right? And on top of that, these are actors playing a part. But the thing about this documentary is like you turn it off and those kids are probably still living today. Like some of them are probably younger than me, right? Like they might be your age possibly. And so it's like, wow, okay, this is the next generation of people who are picking up the mantle of this idea. And I think this film is very important for highlighting that a lot of people think when the old people die, all the racism will be gone, all the negative ideas of the past will be gone. But racism and white supremacy is just like Islamic extremism. Nobody would say, nobody is going to blow themselves up anymore for the name of Allah just because all the old people are dead. We know that young Muslim men are very much more likely to do these sorts of heinous things in the name of Allah or Muhammad, whatever. The same thing is true for young white men. Young white men all across the world are picking up these ideas that their fathers left them about whites being superior, about the inferiority of other groups of people in comparison to the white man. And that's what I think is like why this film is so important. But what do you think about that? Like how Moffie ends, it makes you feel like, okay, that chapter is done. But this feels like the beginning of a whole new stage. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm trying to like think of more of the psychology of it, because I do think there's also maybe like a generational trauma in these little kids, because families who grow up with indoctrinating hate. Hate is so addictive. It's like also very just like a burden in your heart. And when you grow up in a family like that, you take that, and with more things like racism and sexism and homophobia, all of those things, I feel like they just come all together and create a big ball of hate. And that just gets translated from generation to generation. So maybe that's what we were seeing here, or still seeing today. And it's just so easy to pick that up when you're grown in a broken home as well.
Mm-hmm.
And also it's really easy to be brainwashed by your parents, because you always believe in them 100%. And with Moffie, like, yeah, it is fiction, so you don't worry about it that much, because it's fiction.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think the indoctrination that we see in Moffie and also in this film, in Fatherland, they're both very thorough, but this film goes more into that socialization and the indoctrination and how it works. And yeah, growing up in a family that proudly wraps itself around these sorts of ideas of nationalism and ethnic superiority, racial superiority, it probably does sort of like, permeate however you live. Like however you live, wherever you live, you'll always have those ideas inside you, right? And it's crazy that you can pass that down to your children too.
Yeah, definitely. And, they're also constantly related with thoughts of being a man, being a good person. Those kids think being a good person is protecting their own race from black people because they think, black people, only thing black people do is like harm white women and things like that. So there's like that constant linkage between those two things.
Hmm. Hmm. What do you think about the part of the film when one of the colonels is like, you know, they film something with them holding the South African flag. They then shoot at the flag and then set it on fire while they hold up the old apartheid flag and say, the Afrikaners want freedom. We want our own country. What did you think about the burning of the flag scene?
It just makes me feel like they're so mad that world is actually somewhat progressing and there are people who will stand up for injustice, who will stand up against things like apartheid and racism. And it just felt like they're mad. They can't do anything, so they're just burning like flags in their own little backyards. That's what it felt like. But it's also like a flag is very symbolic, so I can also imagine it was a very big deal for these kids. Because there was like one kid who was always questioning what these people were saying, and he said like, you know, I I don't want to burn the South African flag, but at the same time I keep, the other flag in my bedroom, the one that's like pro apartheid flag in my bedroom as well. So even him, he's like, I'm not hating South Africa, but I'm also not hating these racists as well. So
Right.
yeah, it symbolizes like a big thing for kids as well.
Yeah, that kid said he's going to serve in the Air Force one day and he's going to fight under that flag, so he didn't want to burn it. But I wanted to ask you, like, do you think a camp like this should be illegal?
I think it should be illegal because maybe, as an American or other Americans might consider this, oh, we need freedom, like we should be able to do everything and express ourselves. But this is not something that you should be expressing freely because it involves harming other people, or at least the thoughts of harming other people, and then doing it actively, like just out in the open, even though they might not be shooting like any black guys or anyone there. Like they're indoctrinating this idea, which is very, very dangerous, maybe even more dangerous than doing the act itself.
Now,
Cause they're,
what about what the Afrikaners would say? Like, okay, we do need our own nation because blacks are killing white South African farmers all the time. The blacks are now making it harder for white people to get jobs. The blacks are now saying that they want to drive the white man into the sea. The blacks are, pissed off about apartheid and they're not going to give us a fair shot. And we're being targeted because of our race. What do you think about, that?
I think those arguments are very taken out of context because like if they're saying that, they have to really recognize and look at the history behind everything and also the population. Like of course there's more crimes that are being committed by black people because there are more black people in South Africa. So like mathematically that makes sense. And taking that out of context and saying like more black people rape white women and things like that, it doesn't make sense and it's unfair. And when it comes to like them having their own land and things like that, I don't think like black people or black governments would, do anything to them if they weren't this hostile, and they just wanted they just wanted to live there because let's be honest, like white people can live anywhere they want without being discriminated. So they will be able to live anywhere and have benefits of being white on top of it. So like, asking for this secluded thing or feeling, having hatred against the actual population of that area is very unfair, I feel.
Do you believe that every group of people on Earth deserves their own piece of land on Earth?
Not really, but I do think, like, yeah, if you want that, that's fine. But at the same time, like, you can literally go to, like, a lot of places and be with a lot of white people. So why choose Africa?
Well,
Like,
they'll say we were born here, we've been there for generations. This is as much our land as the Turks say Anatolia is theirs.
you might be born there, but once again, there's history of how your people came there. So if you cannot stay there with peace, then I don't think you deserve to stay there at all.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, that's interesting.
What do you think?
What do I think?
Yeah.
I mean, all nationalism is bad. The nation state is bad. It ultimately leads to fascism. There's no way you can have a border and then ultimately say you want to have peace with all of humanity, because somebody has to fight and die for that border. Somebody will get shot over that imaginary line. So, yeah, it's not a good thing. And yeah, I think this film, this film review talks about, oh, the question is, not whether the kids are racist, but whether the Afrikaners actually have a good claim to their nation. I find it hard to think of any sort of white nationalism that does not also include white supremacy. Like, that's the thing. Like, their culture is centered around the idea that they are superior to other groups of people. So that's not a type of ideology that we want to promote. That's not a healthy ideology that can coexist with other groups of people who have different ideas. So, the Afrikaners who say we want our own nation because we're just like any other African tribe, and we've been oppressed too by the British, and we've been in Africa for a long ass time, probably more than some other tribes, and we helped develop South Africa, and we are now being unjustly killed on farms and discriminated against jobs. Like you said, like, history plays a context in it, and also facts as well. In South Africa, white people still dominate the economy. 90% of the wealth is still owned in part and large by the majority of white people who run the country. Even if they don't have political power, they have way outsized economic power and influence. So, being white in South Africa is probably paradise on earth. But these are just like the lower caste of society who just can't let go of the past to get some new cash, if that makes sense. That's my opinion.
Yeah, no, definitely that makes sense. And like you said, I feel like what sets, these people aside, with, their nationalism, and then other non-white groups with their nationalism, is, I feel like, Afrikaners here, or any sort of like white nationalism, doesn't celebrate their own nationalism, but instead they try to conquer others. And they try to just hate on others and spread negativity instead of celebrating their own and owning their own thing. And yeah, that's why. And I think that is influenced by how powerful white race has been throughout the history. I think it's linked to that.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah.
Do you think there is a genocide in South Africa against white people?
I don't think so. Just being real. I mean, I don't know the details or anything. I'm not informed about the situation.
That's
but
great,
generally, I feel like throughout the history, that sort of never happened. So it's hard to believe or imagine.
Okay. Yeah, let's just make this clear. Elon, if you're listening, there is no genocide against white South Africaners. The number of people being murdered on the farm, that has the same number applies to black people who are murdered on farms as well. Farming, unfortunately, in South Africa is a dangerous profession, because it's an agricultural society where if you own a farm and large plots of land, you can make a ton of money. So of course you're going to be a target. And of course, since white people were the ones who owned most of the farms for the majority of time, they're going to be the main targets. But, Africans aren't just running up into a lot of places just murdering white farmers. And a lot of the times the white people who are being murdered are actually murdered by other white people. As you see in Moffie and in Fatherland, right? White people live in enclaves. They live in all white communities. They probably go days without seeing a black person who is not cleaning their house. That's how isolated the white community is in South Africa in a lot of places. Imagine living in Africa and going days without seeing a black person who is not your maid. Like, think about that. That's how far away they are. So,
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, they are already doing what they want, but they just want to make it like legal and all this sorts of things. Like you're already doing it, really, and nobody really says anything to you because guess what? Like, if you're a racist white person, black people doesn't want to see you as well. So like, you can go and do your own thing as long as like you don't harm anyone.
Yeah, we don't want to see you, but we have to see you because we still got to go to work. We still got to go to church. We still got to pay our taxes. So
Yeah.
black people have to deal with racist white people, but racist white people don't have to deal with black people.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the irony of the thing.
But Fatherland is a very good documentary. I feel like I got all the points out I wanted to say about it. You got anything else?
I'm good.
All right. So this has been episode 59 of Simon and Acting Movie Reviews. We reviewed Moffie, the film, which you should watch. I would suggest it. Would you suggest Moffie?
Yeah, definitely. I suggest Moffie and also Fatherland. First watch Moffie and then Fatherland, yeah.
Yeah, I would say Moffie for some people. Like, Moffie is a good maybe starting point in like South African films, maybe. Or just giving a different perspective, but I don't think it's for everybody. I wouldn't suggest it for everybody.
I mean, the thing is, like, I think Moffie, you can watch it without having any background information on South Africa and still get some things. But with Fatherland, yeah, you can still get some things, of course. But I feel like it's a bit more necessary to have a bit of a background information about the history of apartheid and things like that.
Yeah. You should look at a map of Africa. At least look at a map. Look at a map. But I would suggest Fatherland to everybody. Everybody should see that. But Moffie for some people. And my final score for Fatherland is 10 out of 10. That's a hell of a documentary. What do you
Wow.
give it?
I know I gave it a low score last night, but right now I'm going to give it an 8.
Okay, why'd you switch your low scores? Look, this is what pussy looks like, guys. Yeah, y'all should hear her when we are not on the spaces. She be talking wild, but then she gets on here and is like, yeah, Valley of a Thousand Hills is better.
I explain why I changed my decision. Stop, doing that to me.
Go ahead.
But, yeah. I mean, like I said in the beginning, I was a little doubtful of, what people might get out of this. I like the question that it asks. So, and, after reviewing together with Moffie, I sort of think this is more compelling than Moffie now, realizing it a little bit more. So that's why I made my score higher.
Okay.
Sort of comparing it to Moffie as well.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you everybody who's been listening, whether silently or in the playback. Send movie requests, send stuff for us to review. And, we'll be back for episode 60, creeping up on 100. I wonder if we can hit 100 by the end of the year. I don't know. Let's see how it goes. Y'all be easy out there, and peace.